is going to start the evening, hopefully. Phyllis, take it away.
Okay, hi everybody. Shall we go ahead? Is everybody ready? Do you have paper and pencil if you want to note your answers, or you can just, you don't have to do that, but it could be fun. Okay.
I'm not sure that we said, but each question is a multiple choice. So you
Yes,
come up with the name out of your head.
Yes, which makes it easier. And as Virginia said, having an image also makes it much easier in many of the cases. Okay, Caitlin, we're ready for number one. Number one. What Danish-born German expressionist artist continued to be an enthusiastic supporter of the Danish Nazi Party, despite having his works banned as degenerate art? A. Ernst Ludwig Kirchner. B. Kata Kalowitz. C. Max Beckmann. D. Emil Nolde. And this image, of course, was done by the artist I'm asking about, which may or may not be a clue. And take a little time. This is an example of a grotesque, which I love all forms of grotesques. And the last show I had at NOMA, we named grotesques, or grotesque. Okay, has everybody answered? Let's move on to number two then. Number two. What early 20th century neoplasticist painter broke off his friendship with Theo van Doesburg over the use of diagonal lines? This artist insisted that the pure harmonies of expression could only be represented by vertical and horizontal lines. Van Doesburg insisted on the necessary vitality of the diagonal. And the answers are A. Kazimir Malevich, B. Joseph Albers, C. Piet Mondrian, and D. Frank Stella. And this, as you see, is an example of this artist's work only using horizontal and vertical lines. In some of his earlier work, this is a bit of a clue. He was a rather traditional landscape painter to begin with. And his mid-career work was very abstract, but it did include diagonal and curved lines. But he finally came to the conclusion that only the purity of the horizontal and diagonal was acceptable. Okay, has everybody answered? Let's move on to number three.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
The image that you show, I'm not sure the way it was phrased during question one. If we know the creator of the image, the creator of their image is also the correct answer, or not necessarily?
Well, no, the creator of the image is always the correct answer.
Okay, just checking. Thank you. Sorry.
No worries. I didn't want to make this too hard.
Yeah, I got you. That would be tricky.
Hang on a second. Linda, we are not answering the questions in chat. You're actually answering them on your own.
Okay.
And then everybody is tallying it up at the end. So nobody look at
Linda.
answer. Yeah, really. All right, I saw that you were here and I didn't get a chance. So basically, Linda, what's happening is we're asking the questions, giving you the possible answers. I'm also putting the questions, we're asking the questions, putting the possible answers. I'm also putting the questions into the chat. And then at the end,
Okay.
we'll let people know what the answers are and you tally how many you knew.
All right.
Okay. Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Number 3. What pious 15th century Florentine monk painted still existing frescoes on the walls of the cell in his monastery? A, Fra Filippo Lippi. B, Fra Filippo Brunelleschi, excuse me. C, Fra Piera della Francesca. And D, Fra Angelico. And one of the, a little clue that might be helpful, but probably won't, because I just learned this myself, is this artist is the only artist who has ever been canonized by the Roman Catholic Church. And I also admit, as another kind of clue, as another little clue, that I was a little sneaky in this question, and I did put Fra in front of 2 artists who were actually never monks. Okay, has everybody made their choice? We'll move on to number 4. Now this one I think is very tricky, but fun. Number 4, which major impressionist painter also did brilliant caricatures? A, Edgar Degas. B, Claude Monet. C, Edouard Manet. And D, Mary Cassatt. And I think the answer might surprise you, but we'll see. As another sort of little clue, his oh no, I don't think I'll give that clue. I might give it away.
Just as an aside, I love this caricature. I think
Isn't it great?
it's wonderful.
I know. I was so delighted to find these. This is something, again, that I found by accident. Not an artist that I normally pay a lot of attention to. Okay, number 5. What Northern Renaissance painter is famous for the gruesomeness of his paintings of the Crucifixion? A, Peter Bruegel the Elder. B, Matthias Grunwald. C, Jan van Eyck. Or D, I don't know how to pronounce that Roger spelt that way. I think it's like Roger. What'd you say, Linda?
Rogier van der Weyden.
Rogier van der Weyden. And one little clue is, well, this isn't really a clue because you're seeing the image, but we do have he painted the Crucifixion quite a few times. And we have one in Washington. We have one at the National Gallery, a small one. Okay, everybody done? Let's move on to number 6. Number 6, what French artist who painted many portraits of Marie Antoinette had to flee revolutionary France, ultimately ending up in St. Petersburg, where they received a commission to paint Catherine the Great, who died of a stroke before the work could begin? A, Francois Boucher. B, Antoine Watteau. C, Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun. And D, Jean-Honore Fragonard. And this is, what you're looking at right now, is a portrait of Marie Antoinette, which was rather scandalous at the time because she was portrayed wearing a simple cotton dress, which was not considered to be appropriate, an appropriate way to depict royalty at that time. Okay, everybody done with 6? Let's go on to 7. Number 7, what German Renaissance painter was a close friend of Martin Luther, despite a penchant for portraying sensuous nudes? A, Albrecht Aldorfer, B, Hans Holbein the Younger, C, Albrecht Dürer, and D, Lucas Cranach the Elder. He was also the godfather of Martin Luther's first child, which I thought was interesting. So they weren't just casual friends, they were very close friends. Okay, are we ready for number 8? Question number 8. What Italian Baroque painter was tortured with thumb screws to determine the veracity of a rape accusation made by her father against one of his assistants? A, Sofonista Anguissola, B, Lavinia Fontana, C, Artemisia Gentileschi, D, Elisabetta Sirani. And you may recognize the subject of this painting. It is Judith beheading Holofernes, and they recently had a show of hers, which I was very sorry to miss, but it was in London at the London National Gallery.
This is the only one I know the answer to.
Yeah, this is one of the easiest ones, I think. She's gotten a lot of attention for recently and for a while now, deservedly. Okay, are we ready for number 9? Number 9. What 17th century Roman Catholic Flemish artist painted in the Catholic Counter-Reformation style, which was intended to bring Protestants back into the fold? A, Anthony van Dyck, B, Judith Leister, C, Peter Paul Rubens, D, Franz Hals. Okay, and this at first I thought this was a deposition, but it's actually the raising of the cross. And when you really look at it, you see that they're pulling him up. There's a guy with a rope there. And this certainly it's pretty quintessentially Baroque, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
A painter that I only fairly recently started paying more attention to. Even I found it to be a bit much sometimes, but I've changed my mind about that. Okay, let's move on to number 10. Number 10. What 15th century Florentine monk, another 15th century Florentine monk, who is famous for his Madonna and child paintings, ran away with a nun whom he lived with for 2 years before his death. They had a son together who also became a famous artist. A, Fra Angelico, B, Fra Filippo Lippi, C, Fra Bartolomeo, D, Sandro Botticelli. And please forgive my pronunciations. I'm not that good.
I think you're doing great.
And
Haven't known any difference. Yeah.
yeah, in times like this, I remember that our spoken vocabulary is much smaller than our vocabulary that we, recognize by sight. That becomes really apparent sometimes. Okay, are we ready for 11? Question 11. Which early 20th century Dada artist who was critical of purely retinal art abandoned his art career to pursue chess playing? A, Marcel Duchamp, B, Francis Picabia, C, Man Ray, D, Kurt Schwitters. And this is actually a watercolor on paper. I thought it was an oil painting, but then I thought I should check, and it's a watercolor. Excuse me. I'll turn my phone ringer off. Okay. Are we ready for number 12? Number 12. What self-taught artist who was born into slavery in Alabama started drawing and painting at the age of 85 and produced about 1,500 works before his death 10 years later in 1949? A, Henry Darger, B, Jacob Lawrence, C, William Traylor, D, Horace Pippin. And some of you, well, a couple of people, especially the people that I went to this show with, Caroline and Richard, will know this because he recently had a retrospective at the American Art Museum, which was really quite fabulous. Okay, number 13. Number 13, what notorious painter of black canvases, whose work was frequently vandalized at MoMA, called Sculptor, quote, something you bump into when you back up to look at a painting? I know, isn't that great?
I use that quote a lot being a sculptor.
Of course it's not true, but nevertheless, it's funny. A, Barnett Newman, B, Clifford Still, C, Ad Reinhardt, and D, Robert Motherwell. Okay. And this is one of those cases where, well, first of all, it's kind of boring to put up a black canvas on a screen, but so I looked into some of his earlier paintings, and this was one of it, and I quite like it. So he didn't always just paint black canvases, but
Is that one of your clues, Phyllis?
I guess you could call that a clue. He also said, I'll give you another clue. He claimed, this is a quote of his. This is referring to the black canvases. He claimed to be painting the last paintings anyone could paint. So, this had a lot to do with all that talk about the end of art at a particular time. Okay, number 14. And two artists are involved in this question. Which two mid-20th century abstract expressionist artists were singled out for severe criticism by the New York critical establishment, represented by Clement Greenberg, for their abandonment of pure abstraction and return to figuration? A, Mark Rothko and Lee Krasner. B, Helen Frankenthaler and Franz Klein. C, Jackson Pollock and David Smith. D, Willem de Kooning and Philip Guston. And this is another case where I was careful about my choices. Both of these paintings represent earlier points in their career when they still were only doing pure abstraction. Okay. Number 15. What still living American minimalist sculptor was tried but acquitted for the murder of his wife, Anna Mendiata? And this is, there's a typo in the question. There's actually no S on that. Who was also an artist in 1985. A, Carl Andre. B, Donald Judd. C, Dan Flavin. D, Robert Morris. Oh, and there should have been an S at the end of Robert Morris.
We'll just steal the one from Mendia and.
Yeah, exactly. There was a reason for that. I have recently become, after hearing this story, I started looking at some of her work. I wish that he had died instead of her, but that's never how it goes, is it? Okay, but this is an example of his work. All right, are we ready for 16? 16, what contemporary German painter who recently had a retrospective at the Hirshhorn has insisted throughout his career that, quote, women don't paint very well. It's a fact, end of quote. His proof of this is that, quote, women simply don't pass the test, the market test. A, George Baselitz. B, Gerhard Richter. C, Anselm Kiefer. D, Sigmar Polk. And I thought it was odd for an artist, and other people have noted this too, to see the market as mark of quality. The market gets it wrong all the time. But and this is a little bit of a clue. He was born in East Germany, and I think he may have seen communism as a terrible thing. Unlike so many other artists who, I mean, if the history of 20th century art is just chock full of communists and socialists. So, okay. 17. What post-minimalist sculptor escaped Nazi Germany in 1938 as a 2-year-old on a Kinder transport train, eventually coming to New York, and died of brain cancer in 1970 at the age of 34? possibly as the result of experimenting with toxic chemicals? A, Saul LeWitt, B, Hannah Wilke, C, Felix Nussbaum, D, Eva Hesse. And she did experiment with a lot of sort of toxic materials, not making something like this, which was a bit earlier in her career and not necessarily typical. But again, I didn't want to give too much away. And I'm a huge, huge fan of hers. Okay, number 18. What transitional period in European art was created by competition between courtly elites and was characterized by elegant sophistication, ornament, delicacy, and otherworldly escapism? It only lasted about 50 years and has sometimes been called the soft style or the beautiful style. A, Romanesque, B, Mannerism, C, International Gothic, D, Rococo. Okay, and this is an example that you can see at the Uffizi. And this is the only question that I had that doesn't actually have an artist's name as the answer. And I think I just threw it in because this happens to be my very favorite period in art history. Number 19. Who found, oh, I know, isn't this a great photo? I just heard a chuckle. Who founded Dada in Zurich in 1916, wrote the first Dada manifesto, and played piano for Dada performances in the Café Voltaire? A, Tristan Tzara, B, Hugo Ball, C, Hannah Hoch, or D, Hans Arp?
And what a shock that there's a question about Dadaism from Phyllis.
I know, I know. Actually, I threw 2 questions about Dada in. And this is him in his outfit for one of the performances of that happened at the Café Voltaire. Oh, to have been at the Café Voltaire in 1916. Okay. Number 20. What 20th century French artist established art brut, which was an attempt to uncover a primal and authentic aesthetic? He amassed a large collection of artworks by psychiatric patients, prisoners, and children, which can now be seen at the Collection de l'Art Brut in Lausanne in Switzerland. A, Jean Dubuffet, B, Raoul Dufay, C, Fernand Léger, D, Paul Klee. Okay. Well, that does it. Now we can start going over the questions.
So everybody gets to keep track of the answers that they had and, you know, how many that they get. We don't really have necessarily a prize except for, you know, your general well-being at knowing all of this art history.
Virtue is its own reward.
That's what they keep telling me, but
That's what they keep saying, I know. Okay, the answer to number 1 is D, Emile Nolde. And there's such an interesting story behind this. He, you know, there's no doubt that he was an absolutely enthusiastic Nazi. That there's a tremendous amount of documentation. One of his quotes was, "The Führer is great and noble in his aspirations and a genius man of actions." And it gets worse from there. But despite that, he had more works removed from the Degenerate Art Exhibition in Berlin in 1937 than any other artist. 1,052 works were also confiscated from German museums. And he was stung by this. So he started, you know, as a result, sometime towards the end of the war or after the war, he started creating an image of himself as a persecuted artist. And then his foundation that his family ran, you know, continued to try to hide his racist past. In as late as 2019, which was last year, 2 paintings were removed from Angela Merkel's office because she was a huge fan and she just didn't know. She had fallen for the propaganda too. And this is one of those cases of which I included actually quite a few in this quiz, where, you know, the quality of a person's work is so completely different than who they were as a person. I love Emile Nolde's work, but definitely not a nice guy. And now this is when we are encouraging, you know, any comments or thoughts that people have about these.
I see trolls.
Yes, Caroline, you do see trolls.
Just saying, I see trolls.
He did all kinds of things, but a lot of the things he did with these grotesques, but he also did landscapes and you know, other things. So there you go. I love this painting. Okay, now this is a work of Piet Mondrian, who is the one that got into a fight with his friend Theo over whether diagonal lines were appropriate. It's sort of like, Richard, remember when you told me a story one time that I forget who said it. I think it was one of the abstract expressionism, but it said that, you know, people should care so much about art that they're willing to get in fistfights about it, right? What was that?
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, but something to that effect. And
Yeah,
I think that it seems silly to have an argument over this, but
over diagonals.
And yet there is something wonderful about that kind of passionate attachment to art. And there was nothing jokey about Piet Mondrian. I mean, some of these guys had their tongue in their cheeks about things, but he was very spiritual. He was searching for a pure abstract art form that was not materialist. And he thought that he was interested in displaying pure Platonic thought, in which reference to objects in the real world are completely resisted. And personally, I prefer his earlier work, not necessarily the landscapes, but the sort of beautiful trees that have, you know, the curvilinear stuff in them.
Love that.
You know what I'm talking about? I know. And of course, this isn't, you know, you all know what a later Mondrian looks like. It's just squares with
Boogie Woogie. I'm eternally grateful to him for taking Sandy Calder in tow and getting him out of those little circuses with movable cranks and getting him into the mobile stabile mode and concentrating his colors into the primary and the neutral. Thank you, Piet Mondrian.
I did not know that. That's a really
Oh, yeah.
interesting story,
Calder
Linda.
would not have been who he was. His first visit to France, he met Piet Mondrian, and over a couple of bottles of wine one night, his life was ever changed,
Ever
and
changed.
so were ours.
Thank you, Piet.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, now the answer to this is Fra Angelico. He was made a saint.
It was.
This is such a
I have a question, Phyllis. What is fra for? Is that for friar or what?
no, that means brother.
Oh,
Means
It
brother.
just, yeah, it just means you're a monk.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah. And he really was a very pious and virtuous man by all accounts. Fra Angelica means the blessed angelic one. And this is from, if you know, I was in Florence one time, and I did get to San Marco, even though at the time I really wasn't aware of these cell paintings, but it's definitely one of the highlights of all of my traveling, was to see these frescoes. This is the Mocking of Christ. So it seems sort of confusing or symbolic, but it really is less so than it seems. The hands are simply disembodied. He's only showing the parts of the bodies that the tormentors are using to mock Christ, almost as a way of saying they don't deserve any further representation. The head of the man is actually spitting on Christ, and that's Mary and Saint Dominic on either corner. I read something today that I found so interesting. These paintings, you know, a lot of the paintings in this time, and a lot of the paintings in even that he did, you know, had a lot of gilding and were a lot fancier and had stronger colors. Gilding and lapis lazuli were the two of the things that patrons really wanted in their artwork. But this was the beginning of less dependence on those things, more interest in the skill of the artist, and less dependence on hey Anita.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I'm really a klutz at this. Sorry.
That's okay. I just happened to see you.
Happy to be here.
So, and it's now I've lost my train of thought, but he wasn't just this pious monk. He was also someone who was carrying forward the progression of naturalism and realism in the middle of the Renaissance. So he was an innovator
Okay.
as well. Okay. I don't know. I'm curious to know if anybody knew that Claude Monet did caricatures.
I guessed it was Degas.
You guessed it was Degas?
I do.
Yeah.
I guessed it was him, but it was a total surprise.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a wonderful caricature of, and I thought it was by Degas, and it was a caricature of Queen Elizabeth in a tutu dancing, which is hysterical. And I thought it was by Degas, but maybe it was not. Anyway.
Monet.
Well, he did a lot of these when he was a teenager. He didn't like school. He started doodling, which led to him being a cartoonist, and which also led to him selling them at a local gallery. And you know, but then Eugene Baudin saw his caricatures, saw that he had talent, and really encouraged him to start doing some plein air landscapes, and the rest is history. but who would have thought? I used a clue when I gave it to this quiz to my art history group, and they all thought I said, pick the most unlikely person, but I didn't do it this time because everybody thought I meant Mary Cassatt.
I thought his beard looked like his brushstroke.
Okay. Matthias Grunewald.
That one, right?
Most of his work is lost. There's only 10 paintings that survive. They're all religious.
No, that's
This was around the turn of around 1500, and or a little after. I'm not sure the actual date of this painting, but I think it's interesting that it looks earlier to me. It looks like a much earlier painting, and that is not surprising because he did ignore Renaissance classicism to continue in the style of the late medieval or Gothic style of Central Europe. And
His skin tones almost always got overly green.
did they get overly green because his pigments were fugitive, or did he intend that, Linda? Do you know?
I think he intended it.
Oh, okay.
I believe the green was part of a sort of showing a death pallor.
Oh, uh-huh.
Right. Is this part of a triptych?
I'm not sure. This actually, no, this is not the one that is part of the triptych that you're
Okay.
thinking about, because the
Right.
triptych is the Eisenheim altarpiece.
Right, that's right, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And another little interesting thing I found out, the Eisenheim altarpiece was commissioned by the Antonites, and Antonites was a monastic order who cared for the sick, and a lot of their patients had what was called St. Anthony's fire or ergotism, which was caused by rye fungus. And so the way that his Christ figures are depicted actually depict what happens to people who have this disease. So that may have been, he may have even used them as models. So I thought that was really interesting.
What's that disease again?
It's called ergotism, ERGOTISM.
Huh.
And okay, yeah, but the Grunewald. Okay, next, Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun. She painted, like I said, more than 30 portraits of Marie Antoinette and her family. In fact, if you see a portrait of Marie Antoinette, it's very likely to be by Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun, although there were others. She, of course, had to leave because she was completely in with the folks at Versailles. She had married an aristocrat. She had a very high profile when the revolution came along, so there was no staying in France for Elizabeth. I'm glad she got out. She was extremely prolific. She painted 660 or so odd portraits and 200 landscapes. And we also have a very nice Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun at the National Gallery. It's a portrait of 3 women.
Hey, Philip, I just wanted to let
Where
you
to
know.
go? St. Petersburg.
Phyllis, I just wanted to let you know that we are getting along to 10 of 8. I guess that it seems like everybody's very fascinated with all of this. So if we go over, that's fine, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the time that we have.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I've been watching it too. Does anybody mind if we go over a bit?
I don't.
Oh, that's good. That's fine.
Okay, good. And I think, Linda, did you say something about this one?
Yes, I think her escape to St. Petersburg was an absolutely perfect choice because they so admired everything French.
Mm-hmm.
And she probably had a pretty rich welcome there.
She did. And she probably made a lot of money in St. Petersburg. She was not a poor artist. She finally was able to go back to Paris in 1809. They got her off the list of undesirables, and she had a very happy last 33 years of her life in Paris in the country house that she was able to afford with her earnings. Okay. Lucas Cranach the Elder. Such an elegant painter. I think there's a lot of his work. I don't know, it has always surprised me that he did all these nudes when he was, you just don't associate this kind of painting with Protestantism, or I don't. But I found no indication that anyone ever objected or that he got in any trouble for it. It's a perfect example of, I don't know if any of you read Kenneth Clark's The Nude somewhere along the line, but one of the things I always remember is that Northern nudes had this very sensuous S curve to their bodies, almost always, and Italian female nudes are very different. They're very squared off, and they're based on classical sculpture. And it's one of those little facts that once you learn it, you're constantly seeing it. And another fun thing I learned about Lucas Cranach is that he did, along with all the paintings, he did many, many woodcuts for the cheap Protestant tracts that were sold for a few pennies. And this was, again, exactly corresponding to the time of the early printing press. And so he, in his own way, was almost as important a figure to the Reformation in Germany as Martin Luther was, but less well noted, certainly.
Strange shaped woman. Anyway.
I agree, Caroline. That was an odd shape of a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an artist, there's a painter today who paints very similar looking figures. I don't know his or her name, but it's certainly a contemporary that does that.
His name is John Curran.
Yes, that's it. Exactly right. 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 Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I happen to be a John Curran fan, although I know some of my friends really don't like him at all. But I like him.
But there's some obvious influence.
Yes. Yes. Well, a woman wrote a book a few years ago talking about, styles in bodies. And it's fascinating to go through art history and look at how they're depicted, this in different ways at different times. Okay. Artemisia has gotten a lot of attention these days. I think she's just such a good Baroque painter.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody notices how this is probably the only painting of this scene of Judith and Holofernes in which you really think that Judith could have done it. Even Caravaggio's version is a little timid, and some versions are so timid that it's like, come on.
Yeah, well, this woman has like a baker's forearms.
Yeah.
She's been kneading some dough or something.
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking a woodcutter.
Yes,
Woodcutter.
yes. The story about the rape is true. It's well documented. The court testimony still exists. This guy, Agostino Tassi, did rape her. He was convicted and banished from Rome, but the punishment was never enforced because he was protected by the Pope. And that's all you needed in Rome back then. All of the things say thumb screws, but and I did that just because of that, but it wasn't exactly thumb screws. They would wrap ropes around the fingers and tighten them. And it would have been done in the open court. And her rapist would have been watching this. Okay. And she was only 18. I mean, she was 17 when she was raped. She was only 18 during the trial.
Well, wasn't it also something where her father wanted him? I mean, he was very connected with her father, and her father was like, didn't want her to do this. And I mean, there's a whole, like, he was going to marry her and all of that. There was like complicated.
Yes. It's a more complicated story. He did promise to marry her. They did have relations after that, but he never intended to marry her. In fact, he was already married at the time. So there you go. I like this. She was about 10 when Caravaggio died, but she almost certainly would have met Caravaggio as a child. Her father was a painter. That's how she learned how to paint. I don't know if there's any exceptions, but all female painters have fathers and very occasionally a husband. It was their only access to the materials that they would have needed. Okay, 9. Rubens.
Christ looks like Henry Cavill. It's got to be a Rubens.
Right.
Looks like a superhero.
Yeah. And there's such a, for some reason, I'm kind of obsessed with religion. You might have noticed that by some of the questions that I did, but, the difference between Catholic, Counter-Reformation painting and sculpture and what was being done by Protestants at the same time is about as different as night and day. And he lived in a lot of places during his life. He wound up in Antwerp, which was where he was born. And this would have been a time when religious wars in Europe were just rife. And there probably would have been a lot more Protestants than Catholics in Antwerp at the time. And okay, he was also like very successful. He had a good humanist education. He was a diplomat. He was an art collector. He was extremely rich. He traveled. This is no poor artist here. I started liking him when I always avoided the big Daniel and the Lion's Den in the National Gallery of Art. You guys know the one I'm talking about? Yeah, you walk into that room and there's there's something about that painting that's just I don't like. But then my friend Susan Yanero said to me one time, she said, yeah, Phyllis, but the lions are really good. And so a tip about looking at that painting, don't look at the whole composition. It's just, if you just look at the lions individually, they are really great. But there's another painting in the same room by Rubens, and that's what kind of started me liking him. It's a classical subject, and it's very small. Okay,
Really? It looks so much like a Botticelli to me.
Just the female.
Oh, Filippo Lippi's look like Botticelli.
Does look like Botticelli in the background a little bit, but not these boys.
Hmm. I'm surprised.
The Filippo Lippi.
Botticelli was a little later and probably was influenced by, or certainly was influenced by, Filippo Lippi, although they were contemporaries, just not exact contemporaries. This guy was so great. He's such a bad boy. He didn't want to be a monk. His aunt, he was an orphan. His aunt couldn't afford to keep him, so he was sent to the monastery. He was always a troublemaker.
Oh.
She
Broken
froze.
promises, forgery, love affairs, everything. So he was always in trouble, but he was assigned head chaplain in 1452 to the nuns at St. Mary Magdalene in Florence. Now, there's another question, like, why would you appoint Filippo Lippi as the chaplain for the nuns? But anyway, he did meet a beautiful nun named Lucretia Buti, and this is believed to be her in this painting, and asked her to pose for the Madonna, and he abducted her and kept her despite the nuns trying to get her back. Now, I looked, but I couldn't find anything of how she felt about this whole situation. But it doesn't seem like they were trying to get away, or that she was trying to get away. They did have a son together who is Filippino Lippi, which used to confuse me utterly, because there's not a whole lot of difference between Filippo Lippi and Filippino Lippi. But it's an important difference, because if you see a painting that looks like a not very good Filippo Lippi, it's probably a Filipino Lippi.
We'll tell him you said so.
Okay, again, back to one of my favorites, Marcel Duchamp. I think probably a lot of you would have known this one. It's called Bride. This is from 1934, and it was past the time that he was just a Cubist painter. And certainly I think around, he would have been working on the large glass at this time. I find Duchamp's drawings and paintings, especially of this kind, just breathtaking.
The show, the duet with Marcel Duchamp and it was called In Concert or something, in Philadelphia, of course, because they've got a huge collection.
Mm-hmm.
It was wonderful.
Oh yeah, if you're interested in Marcel Duchamp, you definitely have to make a field trip.
Yeah, that
to
show
the Philadelphia Museum of
me
Art.
and Joseph Cornell was just awesome. We drove up just to see that show. I love Joseph Cornell.
Yeah. I love Joseph Cornell too, Linda. Okay, so this is this is William Traylor, wonderful artist, self-taught, born in 1853. So he was born into slavery, he saw the Civil War, he saw emancipation, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, the Great Migration. Unfortunately, did not live to see the Civil Rights Movement. He died in 1949. And he spent most of his life as a sharecropper. And then later in his life, decided to move to Montgomery, where he worked for a while in a shoe factory, but had arthritis, and when he couldn't work anymore, he became homeless, finally found a place to sleep at the back of a funeral home. and he worked on the streets during the day. And I think the amount that he got done in that time and just what he had in his head, it's just astounding.
This was a wonderful show. Richard and I went with
Yeah.
Phyllis to see the show at the National Gallery of his work. And this is normally not the type of work that I would really like, but knowing the history of him and what was going on historically at the time, and just knowing the things that he saw with his own eyes that he was putting down about, you know, white privilege and, you know, the oppression of Blacks. And it was just astounding. This show was amazing. And the things that he would draw on, you know, like, you know, scraps of cardboard and things that he was, you know, that were given to him by, you know, shopkeepers and stuff like that, you know, and sort of deconstructed boxes and things like that. Just because, I mean, that's the materials that he had on hand. But it was just knowing what he went through and seeing it and just sort of feeling the immediacy of it in his drawings. Of, you know, seeing that type of all these traumatic events was very, very moving.
Yeah, I absolutely, Caroline. Amen. Okay, this is an Ad Reinhardt, and apparently people were not accepting of his black canvases because at MoMA, they would actually vandalize them. They would slash them. And when MoMA called him up to tell him what had happened, he said, "Oh, don't worry, I've got lots of them." So he was a character. He's very funny, as you can imagine by this quote. I like one of the things he said was, "Art is too serious to be taken seriously." Again, not an artist that I am terribly interested in because, you know, no one's ever accused me of being a minimalist, but this is an interesting painting, I think.
I see Pluto the cartoon dog.
I don't see the dog. I just see the torso.
Well, it's dog face.
I see the
But
dog
it's absolutely could be a dog face. Yes.
Cartoon dog face.
I see
Yes.
the torso now, but no dog face.
Thank you, Virginia. Thank you.
Red nose, you know, clown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes, definitely a clown.
Yeah.
So I wonder if this is like, you know, if you see the torso, you're right-brained, and if you see the clown dog, you see your left brain. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, never.
It's something like that, although I don't know which. I think it's interesting that you even when you know they're both there, you have to go. You can't actually see them both simultaneously. Your brain can go back and forth between the two pretty quickly, but it can't. You know what I mean?
It's a clown dog torso.
Yes. All right. Number 14. Okay. Willem de Kooning and Philip Guston. De Kooning's woman paintings began around 1940 and continued through the 50s. And Guston, of course, has been much in the news recently because his planned show for the National Gallery was first canceled and then postponed and later and then pushed back. Even now it's supposed we're going to get it in 1922. It's kind of a blessing that this happened because it would have been cut off by COVID. So even though I was annoyed by the people that, you know, thought that there was something wrong with presenting these images of the Klan, because Guston was a total left-wing activist, and he was really trying to, you know, he was mocking the Klan, and I think mocking the Klan in a very obvious kind of way. He wanted to depict the banality of evil, and so by making the, you know, Klan look silly. And these images are, easy to find.
Hi, sweetie. Anything good?
Who was that?
That was somebody who I just muted. So
Oh, okay.
you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay.
Have you seen the hour-long special of Willem de Kooning painting? He's wearing white painter's pants and a white t-shirt. His hair's white. It's the one Paul McCartney's first wife, was it Linda Eastman Kodak, painted with Willem de Kooning, and they're involved in this film. And it is the most luscious application of paint onto canvas I think I've ever seen in film. You just want to lick your lips. It's so buttery and beautiful the way he's painting in that hour-long special. I saw it years ago. I'll never forget it. And I'm not really a Willem de Kooning fan, but that was pretty magical.
I will look for that, Linda. I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the Linda Eastman Kodak, or whatever her name, maiden name was, I think she was kind of responsible for that documentary.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Good to know.
gorgeous.
I'm a total de Kooning fan, actually. I would definitely put him on, in my top 5. Okay, so this is a Carl Andre, and I would recommend. Wait a minute, I'm on the wrong. This is 15. My notes got messed up.
Wah.
Wah.
But you
Who
don't
are you?
right.
Oreo. Tony Soprano. Soprano's mother.
Messed
Yeah.
up.
Horrible woman.
Hold on, I'm getting there. Or not. Okay, well, anyway, I think I remember most of this anyway. There was a trial, and oh no, here I am. I'm right on the right one, and I didn't even realize it. In 1985, in the very early in the morning, I think it was about 5:30 in the morning, Anna Mendia had, as Carl Andre put it, somehow gone out the window of their 34th floor Manhattan apartment. And they'd both been drinking heavily. He claimed not to remember anything, which may be true because serious drunks do have blackouts. But the story was never, she had a terrible fear of heights. All of her friends knew this. She would not have been close, it seemed very unlikely to people who knew her that she would have gotten even close to an open window in their bedroom. The doorman testified that he'd hear a woman screaming no several times right before he heard the thud of her landing on a deli ceiling roof. He was acquitted on insufficient evidence. People are always, women are still angry about this. It's impossible to know what really happened. I feel like it's likely that he killed her, possibly accidentally, but I don't know. But I think what is so annoying about this is that her work, to me, she did a lot of earth body work that had to do with creating these torsos, these beautiful torsos in different ways, with flames and with vegetation. And I think her work is very beautiful and luscious, and I think his work is mostly just boring. He's mostly, but then again, I'm not a minimalist. He's mostly known for that grid of 9 squares of what kind of looks like lead or slate that you see. It's usually on the floor. like at the Baltimore Museum of Art, they have a Carl Andre, and it's on the floor, and you're allowed to walk on it. And he is still alive. Okay. Oh, George Baselitz, why does he have to be such an asshole?
Excuse me.
Such a great painter, I believe. You know, I mean, these are my opinions. Obviously, with some exceptions, I'm mostly focusing on artists that I like. He was a rebel. He was expelled from art school for socio-political immaturity, which in Eastern Germany at the time meant that he didn't conform to socialist ideals of painting. He did have a recent exhibit at the Hirshhorn, which I actually went to. It was just 2018, and I actually went to it, I think, 3 times. I'm really a fan of this guy, despite his
Feelings about women.
Pardon?
His feelings about women artists.
His feelings about women artists. Yeah, I mean, I don't. Where does this stuff come from? I don't know. But based on his criteria, he's right. We don't pass the market test. We don't. People don't pay as much money for our works as they do for men's works. But then again, there's a reason for that.
We're not in the good old boy network like the
That's
boys are.
right. That's right. So, and he's another one. He's still around, and painting. So, yeah. Okay. Now this is
Yeah.
This is Eva Hesse. Eva Hesse has one of the saddest stories that I've ever heard in my life. She, as I said, she got to England on the Kinder transport. Eventually, the family got reunited and did make it to New York. Her parents separated. Her mother committed suicide in 1940. I forget the date. Again, late in the 40s, when she found out that her parents had died in the camps. Eva was a tortured soul in a way, but also, you know, a brilliant artist, and did a lot of fascinating sculpture. This is not typical, but I liked it so much I just had to show it. She also did a lot of drawings, and one of the next that I love, her drawings are just sensational. One of the next field trips that I want to do is to Cleveland, because outside of Cleveland at Oberlin College, they have a permanent exhibit of her drawings, which somehow wound up there. But she was only 34-year-olds when she died. And if you want to watch something really wonderful, watch Benedict Cumberbatch reading Saul LeWitt's letter to Eva Hesse, and Saul LeWitt encouraging her. All right, we're almost done. The International Gothic. You know, just beautiful stuff. This guy was mostly, this is Gentile de Fabriano, a Sienese painter, or mostly a Sienese painter. As I said, it's now in Florence. And the period actually happened around 1375 to around 1425. It bridged the Gothic and the Renaissance and the early Renaissance, only in painting and sculpture. There was no architectural International Gothic movement. And all these different places that had very rich courts were creating amazing work. Most of it still religious, but a lot of it secular. Prague is one of the places that I really want to go to because of the court of Prague at this time under Charles IV, the Holy Roman Emperor, was just amazing. And so there you go. All right. Let's keep moving.
Hugo
Now,
Ball, shut up.
Huh?
Yeah, now Richard's very upset because he was wrong about this one.
How
I
could it
know.
be Tristan Zara?
You thought it was Tristan
yeah.
Zara.
I
Yeah.
did too.
No, that's because this was kind of a trick question. And I knew,
Phyllis.
I knew that people were going to think it was Tristan Zara because he's so much better known. But it was Hugo Ball. Hugo Ball was there first. Tristan Zara was right on his heels. I mean, Tristan Zara got there at the very beginning, but it was Hugo Ball's idea. He wrote the first manifesto, and also he did play the piano. Apparently, he was a very good piano player. And just a
Not with
wonderful.
those
Pardon?
Oh, with
with
those
those
hands.
And but then Tristan Zara continued to travel around. He was also part of Berlin Dada after World War I was over. He became very famous for being a Dada personality, whereas Hugo Ball after Zurich really moved with Emmy Hemmings, and he continued to write, but he became very religious, and they were very poor, and he just kind of disappeared.
Hmm.
But a really intriguing character. Okay, and finally, Jean de Buffet. I just kind of love Jean de Buffet. I always have. We've got some really nice Dubuffets at the National Gallery. And he did collect all this wonderful children's art and psychiatric patients' art. And he finally did acknowledge, after doing a tremendous amount of, going around and trying to find, this authentic expression, that it really did not exist. I mean, culture contaminates, well, maybe contaminates is too strong a word, but you can't, even children and the insane and criminals are part of a culture and are influenced by it. So, but nevertheless, he was a wonderful artist, and I think that what he did was in this research was really, really cool. Okay, that's it.
Hang on, he basically collected outsider art before it was considered outsider art.
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a pioneer in that. Although, it wasn't exactly outsider art as we would think of it today, because he was very interested in people that, well, there was children, of course, but as far as the prisoners and the psychiatric patients went, they weren't artists. They weren't very conscious that they were making art. They were just, what am I trying to say? They were in these institutions, and it was part of what they were doing, but very different than what someone like William Traylor was doing, who wouldn't have fit into those categories. He was just a poor person who had no training, who was making art.
Okay. Cool.
That was so much fun.
All right.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Phyllis.
I hope so.
Oh, it was neat. It was very engaging.
So
I didn't get everything right.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it was
right, yeah.
fun.
Thank you for letting me know how much I don't know.
Yeah, thanks, Phyllis.
Yeah.
that's the question. How many people got them all right?
Good Lord. Yeah.
Yes,
I half.
Caitlin got them all right.
Linda got half of them, and did anybody get more than half right?
I did.
I got 11.
Oh, Jim and Anita.
Really, Jim?
But
Really?
10 of them were guesses.
I got 7.
I got 6, and I
I
didn't
got
go to
11.
art school, so what do I-
I got
Anita, what
8.
did you get?
I got 18,
18.
Oh my
Wow.
With-
18.
but a lot of it was not very deep. It was by elimination. Thank God for multiple choice.
Yes.
Good
Okay.
job, Anita. Anita is a friend of mine from my a drawing group.
Nice.
Oh, very
I
good.
hope that we're going to be able to get starting to do that again, don't you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I miss you all,
Yeah, me too.
but you look great.
So do you.
All right. So in other words, Phyllis, you managed to stump a lot of people on this, which is great. So
Yeah.
didn't I say at the beginning it was going to be educational? That
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
you're going to learn a bunch of stuff.
You're right.
That's really great. Thank you, Phyllis. That was really
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it deserves a return engagement sometime later in the year.
we may be able to do that.
Can we do true false this time?
Yeah, true false. I'm the judge.
Oh, we'll do a lot better. Yeah.
Oh,
And thank you, Caitlin, because Caitlin put it all together on the computer and made this whole thing possible, things that I never could have done.
thank you, Caitlin. It looked great.
Yeah,
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 very
it did
good.
look
Yeah.
great.
Go on the road.
I'll be honest, when we first started talking about this, I was like, oh my God, how do we do a quiz online? You know, how do we do trivia? But it worked out really well. And yes, thank you to Caitlin and to Phyllis and to all of you for coming. That was really great. I didn't
Yeah.
know who was
Yeah.
going to show
Thank
up
you.
for this, but we got a whole bunch of art history nerds here. So that's really great that you guys came and wanted to learn more. Just to let you know, I also in the chat, I also put once again the address, the website for NOMA. And so if you are not on our email list or on Facebook or Instagram, you can check out our website, you know, pretty regularly. And that's where all the information for everything, including the fact that we're open, the fact that we've got a new show coming up next month, the fact that there will be another artist talk in a month, and hell if I know what it's going to be. So, you know, check and see, because it's again, we'll find out what it's going to be. It's going to be fun no matter what.
I love a good mystery.
There we go. Maybe it'll be just mystery night and you'll just have to appear and see what it's going to be. No. We'll let you know.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, and again, this will be on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So if you know of anybody who might be interested in learning some of this stuff, you can send them the link to it. If you have any other questions, now is the time to put it out there. Anybody have any questions, you know, comments about tonight or future? Okay. Well then, thank you so much for being here, and we will see you in a month. Thanks, Phyllis. Thanks, Caitlin.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
you.
you all for coming.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Phyllis. Very
Yeah.
nice.
Fun.